Recording has started.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 6:01 p.m. Welcome to the January 4th, 2023 Landmarks Board meeting. Before we begin, the Planning and Development Services Director, Brad Mueller, has joined us to say a few remarks. So I'd like to turn it over to Brad.
Well, thank you, Ms. Chair. I appreciate that. Thank you, Abby. I simply wanted to say Happy New Year to everybody. It's a time to look back and look ahead. Appreciate all the service and work that you've done in the last year. And we've got a busy year ahead of us, ahead of you. So always very appreciative of your service in this capacity. Appreciate the work you do. I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank the staff for the great work they've done in the last year and the true public servants that they are, and acknowledging that as well. So here's to a new year and all the best to you, and look forward to tonight's meeting. Thanks for letting me join you.
Thank you so much. And Happy New Year to you as well. And I just want to echo your appreciation of staff. And we're thrilled as a board that they're finally fully staffed, and glad to have all of them on board. So thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce our moderator this evening, Brenda Rittenauer. Before we begin, Brenda will review the virtual meeting decorum.
Good evening, and thank you, Abby. I appreciate it. I know those of you who have joined us, community members, many of you have seen this many times, and we appreciate your patience as we go over it for those who might not be as familiar. The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision was designed to support the physical and emotional safety of community members, staff, and board and commission members, as well as supporting democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experience, and political perspectives. You can learn more about the community engagement process that went into creating this vision and read more about the vision itself by going to bouldercolorado.gov and typing productive atmospheres into the search bar. And next slide, please. The following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and some other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during tonight's meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct this meeting are prohibited. And participants may raise their hand to speak during open comment and public comment periods during hearings. Individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted. And with that, we can return to the agenda. Abby, thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I want to acknowledge that we have a full quorum this evening. As with in-person Landmarks Board meetings, the recording of this meeting will be available in the Records Archive and on YouTube within 28 days of the meeting. And we're going to do a quick roll call and introductions of each board member, as well as ML, if you'll introduce yourself after our board members. As the Planning Board Liaison, I'm Abby Daniels, Chair of the Landmarks Board. Bill
Jellick.
Chelsea
Castellano, Landmarks Board member.
John.
I'm John Decker, and I'm one of the two architects as Landmarks Board members.
And I am Ronnie Pelucio, the other Landmarks Board member.
Thank you, guys. And ML, if you'd be kind enough to introduce yourself.
Yes, good evening. ML Robles. I am the Planning Board Liaison, substituting for Lauren tonight, who is off to Florida.
So thank you and welcome once again, ML. We know there are people who are here to participate this evening that may have strong emotions about certain projects. We want to hear from you and have found it more productive if you are speaking to persuade us rather than berating us, staff, or applicants. As with regular Landmarks board meetings, you can only speak at the appropriate time during public participation or at the appropriate time during one of our 3 public hearings. Requests to speak outside of those times will be denied. There are quasi-judicial hearings, so any person testifying, including the applicant, will be sworn in individually. As board chair, I will call for a roll call vote on any motions made. And then I believe we're ready to look at the group agreement slide. This came out of our board retreat on July 25th of last year. Changes are always welcome. This is a living document, and we'll continue to welcome open dialogue. Board members are welcome to use the raised hand function this evening when they want to introduce a new topic or want to, if I haven't called on you during deliberations or at another point. So the first item agenda is the approval of the December board meeting minutes. Does anyone have any changes or alterations to the December 7th meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the December minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, John. I move that we approve these minutes with John's second. So we'll do a roll call vote. Bill?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so the minutes are approved unanimously. Now we'll turn to public participation for any items that are not on the agenda. So this is the time for anybody to speak, not including any of the upcoming hearings we have. And Brenda, I don't know if you see anyone who's raised their hand yet.
I do have a hand up, and we'll just invite others who are in the meeting to raise your hand at this time if you wish. You'll find that raise hand button sometimes right at the bottom of your screen. Sometimes if you have a reactions button, you might need to press that button. Thank you, Marcy. I glossed over this earlier, so I appreciate you sharing it now. This shows various places you might find that raise hand button. I don't think I have anyone on the phone, so no one will need to press *9. All right, if we are ready, Aubrey, I have Catherine Barth as our first hand up. And Catherine, I will enable your microphone and Abby will swear you in.
Hi, Catherine. If you'd be kind enough to swear to tell the board the whole truth and then share your full name before beginning your 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Catherine Barth, and I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
Can I start?
Please.
Yes,
Okay.
and Catherine, you'll see the timer in the top corner of Aubrey's screen, who should be in the top of your viewing screen. Do you see that?
No, I'm seeing the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, maybe Marcy, we could take the agenda down for public comment, and that'll help people see Aubrey. Do you see Aubrey Noble in the top corner, top left corner of your screen?
I see you're in my top left corner. Sorry.
That's okay.
Aubrey's in the middle. Aubrey's in the middle.
Great. So you'll see Aubrey, and she'll have a timer in the top left corner of her screen.
Okay. Well, I don't think I will be speaking. What do I have? 3 minutes? I don't think I will be speaking 3 minutes. But I have just returned to Boulder from being out of the country, and so I'm seriously jet lagging. But I did want to, having come back to the news about the contamination in our library. It was a terrible shock, and it's also something that since I am a frequent user of Carnegie Library, I am wondering if you guys know if the Carnegie Library has been tested for methamphetamine residues. And if so, what the plan for Carnegie Library is. It's been closed the last few times before the holiday. It was just plain closed for the week. So I don't know, but I'm very concerned. And whatever you guys can find out or let us know, I would appreciate it. I'm also very happy that Brad and Christopher are here. And I have to say that I think in all the years I've been coming to the Landmarks Board, which is a lot, I think this is the first time we've had, let's see, the big powers that be come to the meeting that I'm aware of. So I really do appreciate it. And you'll get to understand a lot more about what goes on here and why we love our town and how much all of these people work to keep our town and its history respected. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine.
I don't.
Do you see anyone else, Brenda?
I don't, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Abby. I don't see any other hands up at this time, but we have had another hand come up now. Are you ready to move forward?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we have Lynn Siegel. Lynn, I will enable your microphone and then Abby will swear you in.
Lynn Siegel, and there is no such thing as the truth. So I don't know how I can take that oath. Can you make a suggestion, Abby? It's your truth or my truth?
Well, I think that if you will swear to tell the board your truth, you then may proceed with your 3 minutes.
Or just tell the board my truth. I really would like to hear something back. You know, I'm not part of this community, am I? I mean, I'm supposed to be all happy about everything and like encourage you and then and be nice. And then I'll get answers to my questions. So, okay, I'm being nice. Where's my answers? I can't tell you how many times I've written you and never received a word back. And I'm completely flabbergasted by how 770 went through. That just doesn't make sense. It doesn't, there's nothing remotely plausible about how that went through for demolition. Not remotely. It's just this oblong house, standard, you know, James Hunter, just like, you know, Seventh-day Adventist, just like the municipal building, the Baseline Junior High, you know, the stuff he's done all over town. And it's a beautiful piece of his work. And so they had an entry put on the front. God forbid they have something over their head when they come into the house, you know, just like this overhanging thing with columns. That's not a terribly distortive addition to this property. And then on the back, they did another of their, you know, conical rounded things that was never even shown at the LDRC. You never even saw the back of the building and the significance of it, and nothing remotely close up. And then Spackman, the archaeologist and classics professor at CU, you know, was he a bad guy? He built the thing, you know, with James Hunter, architect. And then 10 years later, his family had shrunk. So he built another place like 2 lots away, a classic Usonian that Stephen Sparn redid. You know, it doesn't Spackman matter for anything, you know, and Corricini bought that house. Len did not understand Corricini wasn't in 770, but Spackman was. And then McFarland, the doctor, I don't know, it's not the same as Bob McFarland, but what's insignificant about this? I don't get it. Something like that amazing estate that was going for 6.1 million, you know, listed with 5 chandeliers in it, a perfectly adequate place to live, advertised even that you could never build anything that size again. So it would be good for a person that wanted that big of a building there. And instead, it's being taken down. I'm completely perplexed how that could happen. And
Lynn, I
no one wants to say
apologize, but your
anything.
time has expired.
Yep, gotcha. Yeah, once again, to be ignored.
And Brenda, do you see any other members of the public?
I do not see any other hands up at this time, so this is a last call to use that raise hand button. And I think we are safe to proceed.
Thank you, Brenda. We'll now close public participation. As far as Catherine Barth's question, I'm not aware of anything at the Carnegie Branch Library for local history. I don't know if staff is aware of anything. And I know we could discuss this more under matters, but Marcy, unless you or anyone from the Planning and Development Services staff know anything more about that library specifically.
Brenda does, if you don't mind answering, Brenda.
Oh,
No, that's fine. I reached out to our Director of Communication and Engagement as folks were speaking to see if we know that answer. And she shared that, you know, we tested the main library because there was a definite identified use of that substance in the library. We have not identified any incidents of use of meth at the Carnegie Library. So there has not been reason to test that facility. And also we appreciate you bringing that question. Just keep in mind that we do depend on staff. The board members do depend on staff to help respond to correspondence when correspondence comes in. We don't expect board members to speak for staff about matters that are outside their purview of the board.
thank you, Brenda. I should have known you were on top of this and would have a response immediately. So thank you. And thank you, Catherine, for your question. So we'll move on to the agenda. We've decided to no longer do a presentation during our actual board meetings about the statistical report, but this is an opportunity for any questions about the approved cases that were listed in the statistical report included in our packet. Do any board members have any questions about that? I don't see any raised hands, nor do I hear anything. Anyone wanting to ask questions about the statistical report this evening? So now we will move on to our first public hearing. The first public hearing is a public hearing in consideration of a motion to adopt a resolution to initiate the process for landmark designation pursuant to section 911.3 of the Boulder Revised Code 1981 for 1804 Mapleton Avenue. The owner is RBB Investments LLC, and the applicant is the Landmarks Board. And Marcy, I believe you are doing this presentation this evening.
I am. Thank you, Abby. All right, so this is an initiation hearing, which is legislative in nature. So the procedure is slightly different than the quasi-judicial hearing. The board does not need to reveal any ex parte contacts, but the rest of the hearing is similar. We'll start with a staff presentation followed by any board questions. The owner, who I do not believe is in attendance tonight, would then have a chance to speak, followed by board questions. The public hearing is then open for public comment at 3 minutes each, followed by a chance for board questions. And then at that point, the public hearing is closed and the board discusses and, if appropriate, adopts a resolution to accept the application or votes not to initiate. This application started back in June of last year, where the LDRC referred the application to the Landmarks Board, finding there was probable cause to believe the building may be eligible for designation. In July, you all had a public hearing, and at that point voted to place a stay of demolition on the application to explore alternatives. In September, towards the end of the stay, the Landmarks Board voted to schedule a hearing to initiate landmark designation or issue the demo permit. And following that meeting on October 8th, the applicant withdrew the demolition application. So there is no current demolition application for this property. On October 12th, the Landmarks Board voted to postpone the hearing. I believe that was to wait until staff resources were back and that I would return. And that brings us to tonight's hearing, which is January 4th, consideration of whether or not to initiate landmark designation. So the options in front of you tonight are either do not initiate landmark designation, in which case it would be closed. A future demolition application would be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Program. The second option would be to vote to initiate designation of the property as an individual landmark. And that would mean that we would schedule a Landmarks Board hearing between 60 and 120 days. That would be, I believe, either the April or May Landmarks Board meetings. If the board chose to do that after the designation hearing, there would then be a City Council review, as they are the ultimate decision makers for landmark designations. The criteria for your review is found in 911.3 of the Boulder Revised Code. For designations that have owner support, we don't have initiation hearings, but with third-party designations, we have this step in the process where the board may consider any number of things, including these 7 items. One is there probable cause to believe the building may be eligible for designation? And balance that with that there are currently resources available that would allow city staff to complete all of the outreach and analysis required. That there is community or neighborhood support for the proposed designation. The buildings or features may need the protection provided through designation. The 5th one doesn't apply because it talks about historic districts. The 6th criteria for your consideration is that in balance, the proposed designation is consistent with the goals and policies of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. And finally, that the proposed designation would generally be in the public interest. You all are familiar with the property, which is located on the south side of Mapleton, next to Fitzpatrick Park, just east of that park where 18th Street intersects. It's located in the identified potential Whittier Historic District, and the yellow marks are the other landmarks that are located in the immediate area. The house is a modest vernacular framed hipped box house with a central chimney that was built between 1892 and 1896. This facade with the projecting bay faces Mapleton, and then there's a porch with some decorative wood detailing located at the entrance. On the right is the west elevation, which faces Fitzpatrick Park, which also has a porch with similar detailing, and there are pairs of narrow double hung windows around the house. Moving around to the rear of the property, this addition was put on in the 1950s. It's a 2-story addition with vinyl siding. And then there's a garage at the rear that is believed to date to the 1920s. The building history, as you're familiar with, it's one of the earliest houses in the neighborhood and is associated with this series of occupants, which varied from numerous immigrants and then also a state senator who briefly lived here. So moving to the staff analysis of the criteria, the first one asks the board to consider whether there's probable cause to believe the building may be eligible. And so staff considers that the building has architectural significance for its tipped box building, which was very popular at the turn of the 20th century. Those notable details include the building form, porch details, the windows and the stone foundation, and for its date of construction nearly 130 years ago. And we found that the house is significant in the context of the neighborhood character and for its location next to the Jesse Fitzpatrick Park and its location within the identified potential Whittier Historic District. And so this first one is, could the building be designated as a landmark? And staff finds that it could be. However, the question in front of you is, should it be designated as a landmark? The second criteria asks the board to consider whether there are resources that would allow the city manager to complete the work needed for the application. These designations over the owner's objection require additional staff resources, including outreach and analysis, and there are limited resources available where there is lack of owner support or community support for the application. And so diverting resources away from other board and program priorities is not recommended. In terms of community and neighborhood support, there's been limited community support for preservation since the demolition application came in. I believe the board has heard from 2 community members, and you've received a recent email in support of preservation of the building. But in general, there has not been, I would say, a large amount of community support for the proposed designation. The fourth one is the buildings or features may need the protections provided through designation. This is the key piece of staff's analysis and in our recommendation to not initiate, is that there's no current application for demolition of the house or garage. And so there is no current threat to demolition as the demo application was withdrawn by the owner. So if demolition were proposed in the future, historic preservation, the program would review an application at that time. The sixth criteria asks for the board to consider the balance in the proposed designation and its consistency with the goals and policies of the comp plan. The plan does not speak specifically to landmark designation over an owner's objection. In some cases, it is appropriate and is one of the things that makes Boulder's program strong, is the ability to do that, but staff also feels that it should be used very rarely. And that is also our finding for it, that the proposed designation, whether it would be generally in the public interest, staff considers that because the demo application has been withdrawn, the initiation is not appropriate at this time and would not be generally in the public interest. So with that, staff recommends that the Landmarks Board not initiate landmark designation for the property at 1804 Mapleton for the following reasons: that although the house has historic and architectural significance, initiation would not represent a reasonable balance between private property rights and the public interest in preserving the city's cultural, historic, and architectural heritage, and that there's no current threat of demolition to the house and garage. Just a reminder of our process for this hearing. I'm wrapping up my staff presentation. The applicant and the public will then have a chance to participate, and then the board will deliberate. And something that we are piloting this time, trying out, is a time management tool, which would help streamline the meetings. And so we've estimated with the chair that the board deliberation may take around 30 minutes. And so to frame that discussion, when you get to that point, the key question is, should the Landmarks Board initiate landmark designation over the owner's objection? If yes, vote to initiate designation, and the designation hearing at the Landmarks Board would be held within 60 to 120 days, followed by City Council review. And if the answer is no, then vote to not initiate designation and the process ends this evening. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions the board may have before we turn it over to the applicant if he is present. And is that Aubrey or Brenda who is keeping an eye on the participants this evening?
I am keeping an eye on the participants, but was just waiting for questions from the board before moving on to the comment.
Okay.
And I don't see any hands raised from board members. To ask Marcy any questions.
And in my communication with the owner yesterday, he indicated he would not be in attendance tonight. I just wanted to double check, and it doesn't look like he is here, which would bring us to the public comment.
Thank you, Marcy. So now is the time for any member of the public to speak to this issue, and you will have 3 minutes. Brenda, I'll give you a moment to see if anyone is raising their hand.
I do have one hand up at the moment, 2 hands up at the moment, and just will give folks a reminder that if you see Aubrey, if you'll wave, your timer will come up in the upper left corner of Aubrey's screen. So our first participant tonight is Catherine Barth. Catherine, I'll enable your microphone and then you'll be sworn in.
Okay.
Hello again, Catherine. Just state your name and swear to tell the board the truth. And Aubrey will start the clock with your 3 minutes.
Catherine Barth, and I will tell you the truth.
Thank you.
This little building, this little brave little building that has been on the corner by the park since 1898 deserves to stay. We should not lose this building. And I don't know of the meetings that I've attended about this building, the owner has never shown up. So I don't know what is in the owner's heart about this building. If it is, I'm going to say if it was like Bill Coburn from some years ago, Bill would very nicely renovate a building, and often even after it was renovated, he would put it up for landmarking. I mean, this is a building that deserves protection, and it really deserves to have its owner landmark it. What I see as the danger of this little building is that an owner without a positive attitude and a kind heart, or whatever we want to say, can easily ruin this building in the renovations or the remodeling that's done. And so I don't know anything about the owner, but the fact that they've not come to any meeting and not participated makes me wonder what's up and what their intentions are. If this building were to, for example, have all of its windows knocked out and its porches yanked off, probably it wouldn't qualify to be a landmark. Those porches are as they were in 1906, and you can see them both in the Sanborn map. So I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but this is an owner that I'd want to take to lunch and say, come on, you need to help us so this wonderful little building does not disappear from this very important corner on the park. And it's a very familiar part of this neighborhood, and it's been there forever. So I don't know. I don't know how to advise you, and I'm sure you will, discuss this thoroughly. But we need to have some kind of an outcome that the building is loved and restored and remodeled, but it's there. It's still there. It hasn't been ruined in the process. So then they can come back for a demolition permit and it would have to be granted. So it's a dilemma and I wish you the best in solving the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Brenda, who else has raised their hand?
Yes, our next speaker is Lynn Siegel. Lynn, I will enable your microphone and then you'll be sworn in.
Yeah, I swear to tell the truth as I know it. This seems like a perfect example of 770 before any additions got added on. So I'd say, I was ready to say, like, don't put forth a demolition because the owner already went forth with the demolition on 1804 and then they went through it. So it's like there's nothing to fight here yet. When they come for a demolition later on, then I'd support saving it. But I'm glad, this is why I like to speak last, because I learned from others. And I can see from Catherine's point, that's probably what potentially happened to 770, although to me, it was not at all obvious. That building really maintained its character very closely. It had an additional garage on on the north side as well, which I didn't mention. But if those, I don't know what happened historically with 770 when those additions were made, but I guess if you have to be kind of preemptive and do a landmarking, then you save, you're more likely to save a building, like Catherine's saying. Like Coburn went and changed buildings, and then they could be, then they couldn't be landmarked. So that's, I'd agree, go along with Catherine for the best chances of saving this building. Although I didn't quite see why we needed to until they apply for a demo permit. But I'm sure that there's somebody that could explain the reasoning for that to me too, but nobody's going to. So that's the way it is. No interactive, no back and forth. Just one voice into the void versus another voice into the void. That's the way you do things with the city of Boulder. So that's the way they happen. Done.
Thank you, Lynn. And Brenda, do you see any other members of the public that have joined or have indicated an interest to speak to this matter?
I do not see additional hands up at this time. So we'll take one pause for last call on this public hearing. No other hands.
Okay, so we will close the public hearing for 1804 Mapleton Avenue and bring it back to the board. And, Marcy, thank you for sharing with board members about piloting this chance to try to have the board deliberation in 30 minutes and approximately 30 minutes to see where we are with the discussion of this particular item. And also, I appreciate you reiterating the things before us this evening and how we should proceed. I don't know, Bill, if you would like to kick off your thoughts on this initiation.
I have nothing to say on it.
John?
Okay, I would like to kick it off. I visited this building and am somewhat familiar with the site. I believe that this building, because of its location, age, and history, is worthy of protection. However, I'm going to agree with staff that it doesn't, in my opinion, and hasn't in most of our actions, serve the public interest to proceed with a preservation against the owner's or owner's intent if there's no immediate threat. Saying that, I do wish, echoing the public speakers, that there was some kind of interim protective status that we could start putting on these buildings that would put them in the radar without encumbering them in the, I guess, way of designation. I'm not as troubled by the situation with this building in that, because at least observed in the field, it appears to have asbestos siding on it, which any renovation would probably want to pull off and replace, which would trigger a review and consequently bring it back into our purview because of its age. So I'm supporting staff's recommendation at this time, but I do think we need to have discussion about this interim protective status for some of these threatened properties.
Thank you, John. Ronnie?
Just to confirm, I can definitely go next unless you want Chelsea to go.
I'm not going in any particular order, so I promise not to forget Chelsea.
Sure. I am in agreement with staff's recommendation. I mean, specifically the point of there being no threat of demo currently. And I just want to say I appreciate our public comments, and I'm in agreement, in fact, with what they're both saying about the qualitative aspects of this building and then the lack of clarification associated with the owner's position. I think to just specifically respond to something that Lynn said, I know we have a fixed amount of time tonight, but I think the questions that you were asking about why staff was recommending the motion as stated are pretty well defined in staff's memo. And I would, if you haven't read it, I would recommend going there. If you have, I think they're really in there, and I think it explains kind of why they've landed on that position, which I agree with. So I'll hand it off to Chelsea.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with Ronnie and with the staff recommendation. So to keep it short, I'll just say that, stick to that.
Thank you, Chelsea. As much as I respect and admire staff, I think this building is worthy of protection. And I think that my concern is incremental change that would render it ineligible for landmarking down the road. I also think, and sometimes it's not such incremental change that can make it no longer worthy of landmarking. I think when I went to a site visit this summer, the thing that really struck me is how intact this block is. And I think these are one of those houses that tell the story of Boulder's evolution that we're losing more rapidly than others. And I was thinking about the very first Colorado Preservation Inc. conference I attended in February of 2007, and there was a speaker there, wonderful speaker named Anthony Tung, and he'd written a book called Preserving the World's Greatest Cities, where he traveled around the world to see what was being lost. And he wrote, there's a great quote from the book in the following day from his book that goes, in the following days, I would explore the back alleys, looking for vestiges of the texture of the historic city, largely composed of modest vernacular structures, sometimes abandoned, decayed, or forgotten. These were the neighborhoods of the history of everyday life, testifying to our capacity to endow the built environment with grace and meaning. And I think this is one of the houses I've seen in recent years that really does endow this block, this neighborhood, the community, the entire city of Boulder with grace and meaning. And I know there's no imminent threat. but I just would hate to see alterations done to it that would change it so radically it could no longer be landmarked. And I have witnessed so many times, if we do ever proceed with an initiation over an owner's objection, how many times by the time this even reaches city council, the owner has agreed to landmark it. So tonight I won't be supporting staff's recommendation, but I respect where they're coming from, and I respect everything my colleagues have said about their thoughts on this as well. Bill, I don't know if you want to say anything at this point. I don't
Bill,
think.
you're muted. We saw you.
Oh, okay.
move your
Sorry,
lips.
sorry. No, I have nothing to say. Thanks, Abby.
Okay, I don't know if anyone has a motion they would like to make.
Actually, I wanted to say something quick. I raised my digital hand. I'm raising both hands here. But it's okay, Abby, don't sweat it. What I was gonna say is that I agree with you too, Abby. I do think that this building, and I think staff does too, rises to the merit of potentially pursuing landmark designation. But the threat piece that I think that you're pointing out is unique to this case for me. Not so much about the block face, but about the exposure of the side of this building as it faces what I think is a public amenity that used to be a right of way. And so there's a definition aspect in the code about what the front of this is that I think is unique to this particular property. I don't think we can solve that right at this moment, but I do believe that there is a route in which significant modifications could be made under the existing demolition code that might be able to skirt something that could be problematic. That being said, I'm hopeful that we can dig into the demolition code this year. And I know that that's on our agenda. And I think that this is a good case study for us to talk about some of the aspects that do trigger different types of review and allow us to prevent the potentially unwanted demolitions that could get through circumstances that are unique. And I don't have a solution to that right now, but I still feel like I will support staff's recommendation in this case and hope that when the time comes for us to have a more robust conversation about demolition review, that we can talk a little bit about this. And maybe there's something in there that will help give us a lever to pull that is like a hybrid version that John is describing, or perhaps just brings it up to the board, or just greater scrutiny that is subjective rather than just the prescriptive checkbox about square footages. That's my position on this. I just felt like I should say that because I know that that's one of our objectives this year.
Thank you, Ronnie. John, did I see a raised hand?
I had one quick comment. As far as the elevations of the house, if we were to see this in LDRC, we would normally say that the side and the front elevation behave as primaries because they're both exposed to the public realm. It's fuzzy when it's two-sided, but we've done that with corner lots, and it's a corner lot for all intents and purposes.
Can I jump in there, John?
Sure.
I don't think this is designated as a corner lot. And I feel like staff actually has the expertise to explain that better than I do. I know there was a conversation when it went through the planning department about that and the nuances of what we see as a park space and how it behaves. But I don't think that is the case here. Marcy, maybe you could answer that more quickly than I could.
That's correct. The code says any street that is facing, any wall that's facing a street, but not an alley, and the west wall is facing a park. So only the north wall, the facade facing Mapleton, changes to that elevation would trigger review. Or if they were taking off more than half of the roof or more than half the exterior walls.
Abby, I'd like to make a motion if that's possible.
Please,
and staff, if you could pull up the staff's recommended motion, that's the one that I'll go with. I move that the Landmarks Board adopt the staff memorandum dated January 4th, 2023 as the findings of the board and not initiate the process of landmark designation, finding that it does not meet the criteria for such initiation pursuant to section 911(3) initiation of designation for individual landmarks and historic districts of the Boulder Revised Code 1981, and in balance is not consistent with the goals and policies of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Chelsea. On a motion by Ronnie, seconded by Chelsea, we'll move on to a roll call vote. Bill,
Aye.
Chelsea,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Ronnie,
Aye.
and I vote nay. So the motion passes 4-1. So we'll now move on to agenda item 5B. I believe Claire is taking the lead on this. This is a public hearing and consideration of an application to demolish a building constructed in 1971 located at 825 South Broadway Street, a non-landmarked building over 50 years old pursuant to section 911(23) of the Boulder Revised Code. The owner is Mock Property Management and the applicant is Stephen Sparn.
Thank you, Abby. So I will go through the quasi-judicial hearing procedures. All speaking to the item will be sworn in, and board members will note any ex parte contacts. I'll give the staff presentation. After that, the board may ask questions. The applicant will have 10 minutes to present to the board, and the board may ask questions. We'll then open the public hearing. After all members of the public have made comments, the applicant may respond to anything that was said. We'll then ask everyone to mute their computers and the board will deliberate. A motion requires an affirmative vote of at least 3 members to pass. Motions must state findings, conclusions, and recommendation. And a record of this hearing is available in a couple of days as a video recording, and the official record will be added to the records archive within 28 days, but usually sooner. So I will pass this back to Abby for ex parte contacts. The board has requested that we note who has reviewed this previously, and it was reviewed at the LDRC by Ronnie and Bill on October 19th. So back to you, Abby.
Thank you, Claire. We'll do this in alphabetical order. Bill, any ex parte contacts?
No.
Chelsea?
No.
John?
None.
Ronnie?
As you heard, I reviewed this at LDRC and I, was in support of this coming to the board. And at that DRC, I also said what I'm about to say now. I am former colleagues with the applicant. That's the signature. His name's Scott Shager. I feel like I am fully capable of reviewing this application. And just to clarify, we were coworkers at another firm and I still like the guy a ton and respect him a ton, but I'm fully capable of reviewing this case.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. And before we get the staff presentation, I do want to thank the owners who have agreed to this virtual quasi-judicial hearing virtually.
All right, thank you, Abby. So as we note in the agenda, the criteria for review is outlined in the Boulder Revised Code under 911(23). The purpose of reviewing demolition applications is to prevent the loss of buildings that may have historic or architectural significance and to provide the time necessary to initiate designation as an individual landmark or to consider alternatives for the building. The criteria that can be considered are the eligibility of the building for designation as an individual landmark, the relationship of the building to the character of the neighborhood, the reasonable condition of the building, and the projected cost of restoration or repair. although not deterioration caused by unreasonable neglect. And the options for the board today are to approve the demolition if the board finds the building does not have historic significance, or place a stay of demolition for 180 days to consider alternatives to demolition. The stay would expire on May 14th, which is 180 days from the date the Landmarks Board hearing fee was paid. The third option is to initiate landmark designation. So the process so far for this property, staff referred the application to the LDRC, which reviewed it on October 19th, and referred it to the Landmarks Board, finding probable cause to believe the building might be eligible for landmark designation. I need my pointer. There we go. So the property is located on the west side of Broadway. This is Broadway here. And south of Hanover Avenue, which is here. The Table Mesa Shopping Center is located to the north right here. The property is surrounded by residential neighborhoods, you can see on either side of Broadway, and is not located in a potential historic district. It's a one-story commercial building. It features this prominent neo-mansard roof here with very deep eaves. On the east and west elevations, this is the east elevation facing Broadway. It also has a stacked stone facade. Typical of a 1971 building, the entrance is not particularly obvious, but this is the front. There's a door in here somewhere, and each corner has a pretty large stone mass, which you can't see very well on this picture, but you can see very well on the next picture. And these deep, narrow stone columns between the windows here. So here are the corner masses. You can also see on this elevation that the roof is inset rather than overhanging. That is on both the north and south elevations. You can see, this is a better picture of this, the stacked stone is interspersed with these larger organic geometric pieces. So we're going around the building. This is the west elevation, so facing the mountains. You can't quite see Broadway over here. This is the rear of the building. So again, the mansard roof overhangs on this elevation. You can see the pretty deep shadow there. And the stonework and this rear deck that was added after 1992. So we're all the way around the building now. This is the south elevation, very similar to the north. It has the inset roof, and you can see the pattern of the large corner and the narrow horizontal stone columns. The building was constructed in 1971 by Leach and Arnold Engineering and Construction for Security Bank of Boulder. It originally featured this wood shingle on the mansard roof with no window openings. Neoplan Bus Company, they were a bus manufacturer in the 80s. They purchased it in 1983 for a sales office. And then that closed in 1988. The building was vacant between 1988 and 1992. Mock Properties, the current owners, purchased it in April 1992. They remodeled it, including the second story on the inside, adding these window openings throughout the roof. They switched out the wood shingle for a standing seam metal roof, and added that deck on the west side and also this ducting on the south elevation. So you will have seen in the memo that staff doesn't believe the building retains integrity of its character defining features. The National Park Service provides standards that define whether a building retains enough integrity to convey appropriate historical associations or attributes. And we use these standards in addition to the criteria set out in 9.11.23F of the Boulder Revised Code. which, as a reminder, are the eligibility of the building for designation as an individual landmark, which is outlined in 911.1 and 911.2, the relationship of the building to the character of the neighborhood, the reasonable condition of the building, and the projected cost of restoration or repair. So the research that we completed confirmed the date of construction as 1971. We did not find any information associating the building to any specific notable persons or businesses. And we didn't find any recognition by local historians or other organizations. The building does demonstrate somewhat the growth of South Boulder after World War II, as Boulder developed areas outside of the downtown for residential and businesses. This period of time saw innovative mid-century designs, especially for banks, which saw a benefit in having this modern appeal. So for architectural significance, the building does have the characteristics of the neo-mansard form with rustic modern elements, but due to the extent of alterations, it doesn't meet the architectural significance criteria. The rustic modern characteristics include the use of traditional materials like stone and the original wood shingle, which has been removed. Also the combination of horizontals and verticals, the deep overhanging eaves, and no ornamentation. However, this building, we feel, is no longer a good example of Boulder's mid-century architecture. The introduction of the windows into the mansard roof breaks up the volume of the roof, and the replacement of the original wood shingles alters the scale and texture of the original design. So other than its visibility from Broadway, we didn't find anything of note for environmental significance which enhances the variety, interest, or sense of identity of the community. So this is Boulder in 1971, South Boulder. I couldn't tell you where the building ended up being on this map. I looked and looked and could not see it, but it was built the year after this image was taken. So this gives you an idea of what Boulder in this area looked like then. The development of these commercial areas along Broadway in this area, including the Table Mesa Shopping Center, were key to the success of these residential developments. Table Mesa and Mountain Acres during the 1950s and 60s. The building, once it was built, was prominently visible along Broadway. However, the area immediately surrounding the property has changed significantly and doesn't retain this historic character. For criteria 3 and 4, information about the condition of the building and projected cost of repair was not submitted as part of the application. So with that, staff's recommendation is that the board approve the demolition request as the building doesn't meet the criteria. More specifically, that a stay of demolition for the property at 825 South Broadway is not appropriate based on the criteria set forth in section 91123F, as the building does not retain the integrity of its character defining features. So that is the end of my presentation. Again, this is a quick reminder of the next steps. The applicant has up to 10 minutes to present to the board, followed by public participation. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to anything that's said, and then the board will deliberate. So a reminder that the question for today for the board is if the building has historic significance. If yes, the board will place a stay of demolition on the application to provide time to consider alternatives. And if no, the board will approve the demolition request. Any questions from anybody before we continue with the applicant's presentation? Okay. Aubrey, Stephen is here. I believe he is going to present to the board, I think.
Yes, pardon me. It will take just a second to get him situated. Stephen, it looks like you have been successfully promoted.
Okay.
Stephen, would you like me to show your slides?
Yes, please. I think if you could just jump, I'm going to be very short because I think staff has done a very good job in presenting this property. If you go to the next slide, I'll make this very short. There's only one piece of information I'll add to this.
Okay, and Abby needs to,
Yeah.
sorry,
and
swear you in
Stephen-
first.
Stephen,
But let
this-
me introduce myself. My name is
Yes.
Stephen Sparn, Sofer Sparn Architects. I represent Mock Properties, and Happy New Year to
Thank you. And Stephen, if you would be kind enough to swear to the board that you'll tell the full truth to the board, that would be great.
And I will tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay. If you could go to page 2, please. Really, the only thing that I wanted to show here on this page is this is kind of a synopsis of the history. Curiously, I was a young architect. I came to Boulder in '69 as an architecture student, and I actually watched this building be built. And then I did not know who the architect was or even who the contractor was, but in a way, it was a very interesting building in my mind. But working with the owners, I put together the history, and it is kind of an interesting history. But the key point that I really wanted to show with this slide is that the building is 52 years old, and I won't go through the history because Claire and Marcy put together a very nice detailed presentation here. But the building was in its original form, which was rather interesting, for 21 years, and then it was substantially modified in 1992. And so it's really looked like that for the last 30 years. And so it really hasn't retained any of its original integrity. And so that is why I agree with staff's recommendation, and happy to answer any questions, but I'll keep it short and sweet.
Thank you, Stephen. Do any board members have questions of Stephen?
I do, actually. Just one quick question. Stephen, can you elaborate on the modifications that are being identified as substantially altering the, I guess, character giving form of the building?
Sure, I think that's a very fair question. It originally was a one-story building, and it was converted into a two-story building. So as you can see, it was a bank back then, and when you walked in, it had this big atrium, and the key list of the things what happened is they created a second story and added approximately 3,500 square feet. So the building was substantially increased in size. As you can see, they added 20 exterior windows. If you could scroll through, if this is this is my presentation, you can now keep moving on. Yeah. So the second story has been added and the roof has been significantly changed. And so as you go around the side, it was created, it was turned into a two-story building. So it went from a one-story building to a two-story building. This massive HVAC ducting was put on the south elevation. There was a deck that was placed on the west side. And probably most notable, it's got a standing seam roof on it. I do agree that the parts of the building that I really like are, it does have these stone corner anchors with this nicely proportionate vertical stone fins. But the point that I'm trying to make is it does not retain its original integrity.
Okay.
And then one last thing, a large skylight was added onto the roof. So those are the exterior changes. There were a lot of interior changes that are not relevant to this discussion. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered the question. Thank you.
Any other board members have questions for the applicant? I don't see any raised hands or hear from anybody, so I think it may be time to move to public comment. And Brenda, do you see anyone who has indicated they'd like to speak to this agenda item?
I do not see any hands raised as of yet, and invite folks to use their raised hand button to indicate they would like to speak. We have one raised hand, Lynn Siegel. Lynn, as a reminder, your timer will be in the top corner of Aubrey's screen. I will enable your microphone and then you will be sworn in.
Yeah, I agree to say the truth as I know it. I'd say lose the HVAC. And the second story, as Stephen was talking about, should be demolished, but the columns and the stone anchors at either end should be preserved. Otherwise, I think that the way this has been done, I think there's integrity in the stone columns and in the anchors on the side. And that was the original scene of the whole building, right? They just added on the upper floor. And I guess, theoretically, this should have been landmarked back then for the stone columns and that original, and the anchors on the side. Originally landmarked. But I don't know how this works. People can come and do additions without going through any kind of a landmarking situation. I suppose if it's before the 50 years or whatever, then they can do what they want. But in this case, when that was added on and they could do what they want, so let them demolish that, but keep the stone on there. And not only that, this is something that's really important. This should go through Environmental Advisory Board before it's approved at landmarks or considered at landmarks. And it shouldn't be a matter of cost, number 3 and 4, the cost of renovation, because you know what? The cost goes down as we stop demolishing things and challenge the architects to do with what they've got, like Stevens Barn did up at Spackman's other house, at the last house in Boulder going out up Flagstaff Road. He managed to get that Usonian built into there. He can manage to get these columns and those those stone anchors into some building that he wants to put on the space. And the more that you challenge the architect to do adaptation, adaptive reuse, the cheaper the adaptive reuse is going to be, isn't it, ML? I bet it is. I know it is. Because the more we demolish and the more it's new, it's more expensive for everybody, and it doesn't drive creativity. Architects need to be creative. They need to creatively, there need to be courses at CU in environmental design on creative readaptation.
And Lynn, I'm so sorry, but your time has expired. And Brenda, I'll give you a moment to see if any other members of the public would like to speak to this agenda item.
Okay, last call on raising hands for this agenda item. And I am not seeing any additional hands at this time.
So we'll go ahead and close public participation for agenda item 5B. And Stephen, you do have an opportunity for 3 minutes additionally to respond to anything you heard during public comment.
Am I live right now?
You are live right now.
Okay.
Oh.
Here I put on a nice shirt and you can't even see. But anyway, that's fine. The only thing I would, maybe this is more directed at Lynn, is I do agree that architects need to be more sensitive to this thing. And it's real important that the board, I see myself as a preservationist. And in fact, I've had the honor of landmarking 8 buildings this year. They're all in Boulder County in 2 different projects. And I do believe that the burden is on architects to do better and whenever possible. But this case, this specific does not retain its original integrity and does not meet the criteria. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. And now we're going to move on to board discussion. I ask that everyone mute your computer or phone for the duration of this discussion. Again, in this pilot program, we're allotting approximately 30 minutes to have a board discussion about this property. And I don't know if there's a board member who'd like to kick off the discussion. Ronnie? would you be
Sure.
willing to? Thank you.
Yep, sorry. And just sorry, I shut my video off. I'm eating dinner. But I stopped. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with staff's recommendation again here. I am grateful that it went through this process, first of all, because when it came to us at DRC, it looked like it had all of the merit that should go through further review. And I think it did. And I think staff and the applicant have both identified and resonate with one another as to what modifications have been made to this building and why it no longer qualifies. And I'm in agreement. And, you know, I could repeat them, you know, predominantly it's the roof form change and the fact that there's habitable space where there wasn't. And in the process, there were windows added in this dormer-like fashions, as well as a change in material on the second floor. So I think that I am in agreement with staff. I think that they have described this accurately per our regulations. I also would say, I think that public comment is a great reference point for a way to potentially preserve aspects of the building, while it may not be the applicant's desire, that those comments are also on target with a version of preservation that addresses aspects of the building that are still evident and were present and evident when we saw it at DRC, which is why we called it up here. So I'm in agreement with staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Ronnie. John, would you be willing to go next?
Yes, I would. I'm not in complete agreement with staff's recommendation. I think it's arguable that at least a significant percentage of the character giving elements of the building are still evident. I understand that the change to the roof is what, based on our criteria, makes things, I guess, fatal to the building. I think that this is another example of kind of a failure, particularly with this type of architecture, and this period of history seems to be failed by the criteria in Boulder. Mid-century modernist buildings, there's kind of an implicit design intent in many of them, particularly the commercial ones, that they are going to be changed and evolve through their life. And we have no way to, I guess, accommodate that, and we're losing a great deal of it because of somewhat cosmetic changes. That being said, I think that at this point it would be nice in a more non-binary way if there was some differential preservation, at least of the stone elements on the public side of the building or the Broadway side of the building, because I think that they would continue to lend character to whatever ends up happening behind them. That's just my comment. Otherwise, I'm supporting staff's recommendation because it matches the criteria as written.
Thank you, John. Chelsea?
Yeah, I agree that the staff recommendation follows the criteria that is laid out and um that we should approve the request.
Thank you, Chelsea. Bill?
I have no comment.
And first of all, I want to say, I think that when this was first built, it was a really cool building. I think it still is a real cool building, as my colleagues have pointed out, primarily because of that stonework. And I don't know if this would ever fall into a non-contributing restorable building, because I agree that the roof form has changed it so dramatically. I also see elements from the original 51-year-old building that are still there, but I will be supporting staff's recommendation this evening. Are there any other questions or comments from the board before we entertain a motion? Would someone like to put forth a motion? And Claire, would you be kind enough to bring up the language of the suggested motion?
Yeah, I would like to make a motion. And then I also would like to see if this is a great moment to allow ML to speak if she has any comments on the matter. Not to force you to do that, ML, but we often do that with these cases. We missed it on the last one. You may or may not have something to say about this one or the next one, but this seems like a good time right before I make this motion.
Thank you, Ronnie. I appreciate the opportunity. I did go out and look at this building, actually, and I would agree with the staff's motion. There were 1970s were not the best time for architecture, and I think that this building has probably served its useful purpose.
Thanks,
Thank you.
ML. I think, I think, Abby, is it cool if I move forward?
Yes,
I
and
can't see
Ronnie,
you,
thank
so-
you for
Yeah.
including ML in this discussion.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. We're all on the same team here and, it's cool. So, I move that the Landmarks Board adopt the findings of the staff memorandum dated January 4th, 2023, and approve the demolition application for the building at 825 South Broadway, finding that the building to be demolished does not have significance under the criteria set forth in section 91123F BRC 1981.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, John. On a motion by Ronnie, seconded by John, we'll proceed to a roll call vote. Bill?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so the motion passes unanimously.
Can I ask
Very
a
much.
quick question before
Certainly.
before you go to the next case? I always appreciate Bill's thoughts on this, and I know that he might be just trying to expedite a process here. Bill, I just want to encourage you to make sure that you get a voice in here, because I really do want to hear what you have to say. And if you have anything to say about this one and why you voted that direction, that might be unique, please do.
No, I have nothing to say about it. Thanks, Ronnie, though.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
So we will now move on to item 5C. Unless any board member wants to take a brief break, or we could go ahead and proceed to agenda item 5C. Is everyone okay?
I think so.
Okay. So this is a public hearing and consideration of an application to demolish a house and garage constructed circa 1940 at 2119 Mariposa Avenue, a non-landmarked building over 50 years old pursuant to section 91123 of the Boulder Revised Code. The owner is Vanessa Miles and the applicant is Eric Berry with Colorado Demolition. And I believe, Marcy, we're handing this back to you to do the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Abby. Yes, and I would just like to say we're piloting these adjustments in part because our last meeting went till 1 o'clock in the morning. We are flying through the agenda, and I just want to say none of the adjustments were intended to cut off any of the board's deliberation or cut the process short. So please don't feel like you can't share your full thoughts. With that being said, I'm going to get started on this final case in front of the board this evening, which is consideration of a demolition application for 2119 Mariposa. So the quasi-judicial hearing process for the demo hearing is that all speaking to the item are sworn in. Board members then reveal any ex parte contacts, and then all provide the staff presentation followed by board questions. The applicant then has 10 minutes to present, followed by a chance for the board to ask questions. The public hearing is then open for comment, and the board may also ask questions. The applicant then has a chance to respond to anything that was said. And after that, the public hearing is closed and the board discusses. A motion requires an affirmative vote of at least 3 members to pass. Motions must state findings, conclusions, and a recommendation. And finally, a record of the hearing is available approximately, within a couple weeks of the Landmarks board meeting. All right. The purpose of the review tonight is to prevent the loss of buildings that may have historic or architectural significance, and to provide time necessary to initiate designation as an individual landmark or consider alternatives for the building. The criteria for your review is found in 91123 of the Boulder Revised Code, and it is in 4 parts. The first is the eligibility of the building for designation as an individual landmark. The second is the relationship of the building to the character of the neighborhood as an established and definable area. Third is the reasonable condition of the building. And fourth is the reasonable projected cost of restoration or repair. And in considering the condition of the building and the projected cost of restoration or repair, the board may not consider a deterioration caused by unreasonable neglect. So this property at 2119 Mariposa is located on the north side of Mariposa between 21st and 22nd Street in, I would say, the lower Chautauqua neighborhood. There is an alley that's located to the east of the property and then runs along the rear of the property. And there are 2 buildings. There's the house here and then a garage on the back of the property. It is not located in a potential or designated historic district. Here are the photos of the house, which is of stone construction or of frame construction with stone cladding. It's a bit unusual. I think the history is a bit unique, but you can see that the stone has a rubble appearance, and then there are concrete sills underneath the windows, which are divided lights on the side and then casements at the front. The front of the building, which faces Mariposa, has shingles in the gable end. On the front, it's actually asbestos shingles, which have been recently removed. The ones on the back are the original wood shingles. And then there's an inset porch with the concrete lintels, and as you can see, the casement windows to the right of the end. Looking at the tax assessor card was a bit of a puzzle for staff to unravel, because the stone garage looks like it's in a state of disrepair in this 1949 photo. We believe that the stone garage is older than the house, and from what our research shows, the house was likely built prior to 1940. It's evident in the 1938 aerial of the area, and then may have been faced with stone at a later date. In any case, it has been in this appearance since 1940, as a stone craftsman. So going into the criteria for review and the staff analysis, staff finds that it is potentially eligible for landmark designation. And starting with its historic significance, that's based on its 1937 to 1947 date of construction. Though we don't know the exact date, it's one of the few post-depression but pre-World War II houses constructed in this area. Second is its association with persons or events. Cecil Cox and Donald McCormick are notable owners of the property. Cecil Cox likely constructed the house. He and his wife Mary are associated with multiple working class businesses in Boulder. He had a coal and firewood business and later a landscaping business downtown. And then the longest owners of the property were the McCormick family, which owned the house for more than 60 years, starting in 1955. And Donald was a farmer and a gardener at Nist, which geographically is very close to this house. Third, the house is located in the inner urban park addition to the city, which was platted in 1908. The eastern part of this neighborhood remained rural until the 1950s, and indeed this property was used as a farm in its early days. In the 1950s, the area was developed in response for the housing needs for returning service persons and construction of the National Bureaus of Standards Central Radio Propagation Lab, now known as NIST, and that occurred in 1954. And then finally, this property was surveyed in 1992, and at that time it was considered to be significant as an example of vernacular architecture and notable for its stone construction. Moving on to its architectural significance, staff finds that it's a vernacular house with elements of the bungalow form. Those elements include the moderately pitched front gable roof, overhanging eaves with originally exposed rafter tails, simple horizontal lines, and craftsman elements like the shingled gable end. And this vernacular form of the bungalow was popularized in post-World War I by companies who offered self-built house plans and kits. There is not an architect or builder of prominence, though we did find that the polygonal stone facing does exhibit artistic merit. It is an example of the uncommon as a stone face vernacular bungalow. Although there are some examples of similar properties, it is becoming increasingly uncommon, and the stone is likely locally sourced. That brings us to environmental significance, where staff found that it has typical residential characteristics. The house sits back from the front of the lot, creating the front garden as well as a rear yard between the house and garage. We did not find that it had compatibility with its site, or that it is geographically important. It's not a visually prominent building. However, its location in Interurban Park and one of the earlier houses in that in this area is notable. The property is not located in an identified potential historic district, and the area has not retained the rural feel of the 1940s. It retains its residential character. And finally, which repeats, the area is not in an identified potential historic district. The criteria next asks us to look at the relationship to the surrounding area. And the surrounding area has an eclectic character with a wide range of building ages, mostly post-World War II, many of which have been heavily modified. And this vernacular construction and the use of the stone facing identifies the house as one of the older properties in the area and adds to the character of the block and area in general. The owner has submitted information on the condition of the building and the projected cost. I will let her speak to those. The cost estimate was included in the packet, and some estimated numbers, which include both interior and exterior work, is about $430,000. And for an 830 square foot house works out to be about $518 per square foot. I'd be curious if the board discusses that, to hear from John and Ronnie about the current cost of construction in Boulder. Based on my knowledge, it's about somewhere from $350 to $550 a square foot these days. And then in terms of the condition of the building, I'll also let the owner speak to the condition. So with that, staff recommends that the board place a stay of demolition on the building for a period not to exceed 180 days in order to explore alternatives to demolition. And I thought I included the date of when this stay would expire, but I can look that up if the board would like. And then as a matter of the order, that concludes my staff presentation. The applicant will then have a chance to respond, and as well as the public, and then the board will deliberate. And we've estimated about 30 minutes for the board deliberation. And the question in front of you all tonight is, does this building have historic significance? If yes, the board would vote to place a stay of demolition to provide time to consider alternatives. And if no, then the board would vote to approve the demolition. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions from the board. And I would also ask the chair, Abby, I may have skipped over the ex parte.
You did. And so why don't we do ex parte, and then any board members who have questions can ask them of staff. So Bill?
No.
Chelsea?
No.
John?
None.
Ronnie?
None.
I had none, but I did drive by the property to see it before this meeting occurred. Do any board members have any questions of Marcy at this point? I don't see any raised hands. So we will move to the application for this. And we do want to thank the applicants for agreeing to this virtual quasi-judicial hearing procedure. So thank you for that. I don't know who will be speaking on behalf of the applicant this evening, or if several people, if you pool your time, you will have a total of 10 minutes.
And Aubrey, the owner is Vanessa Miles.
Thank you. Just one moment. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you all for everything you do for the city. I do really appreciate the history of Boulder and the things, all of the things y'all are doing to help preserve it. I bought this house a couple of years ago. I actually outbid somebody for the house because I wanted to save it, because I don't want Boulder to lose its character and lose its history. But over those 2 years, I have, I just had the idea of pulling out the kitchen and putting it back, you know, updated. And in doing that, everything started falling apart. And it was like floors had to come out because they were rotten in places, electrical. And then this picture that you're looking at is just showing the support in the house. The foundation is gravel, or I don't know what you call the rocks that they use for foundation. And then we have like logs. They are supporting the beams under the house, which are also not up to code, and they're width apart from each other. So I just, at this point, I got to this point and I realized it was just a much bigger project than, it wasn't just like quickly fixing it up to look cute and save it and live in it. So at that point, I hired a contractor to come in to give me an estimate. That was the one that y'all can see. And it just, for an 800 square foot house, it just was, it felt like I was having to rebuild the whole house, I guess is what. So that's where I stand. That's where I felt like, and this is just the house. I haven't even really looked at the garage. The garage actually is a lot more sturdy than the house. It seems to be standing sort of strong. The house, the chimney is also leaning, and it just needs, it's just hard to understand how to bring it back to where it should be to be a house without being overboard. So that's my dilemma in this, and that's why I wanted to take it down. I think that's all.
Thank you, Vanessa. And if you don't mind, for the record, I know I'm doing this after you spoke, but if you would swear that you told the board the full truth, that would be great. And then we'll see if any board members have questions for you.
Okay. I swear I told the truth.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
And to my colleagues, any of you have any questions for Vanessa? Seeing and hearing none, we will move on to public participation for anyone from the public who would like to speak to this agenda item. And Brenda, I'll give you a moment to see if there's any member of the public who's raised a hand.
Thank you. At this point, I have one raised hand and invite others who are here from the community, two raised hands, to raise your hand if you would like to also participate. We'll start with Adrian Sheffy. Apologies if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. I will enable your microphone and then you'll be sworn in.
Brenda, you got my name perfectly. Thank you.
That's great. And if you would be kind enough to raise your hand and say you'll tell the board the whole truth, and then repeat your name, and the 3-minute timer will begin. Thank you.
Yes, Adrian Sheffy, and I will tell the full truth, and I will respect the time of the board. I think you guys are doing a great job doing this so efficiently tonight, and I'm very impressed. So I think staff gave a great summary. I think they did a really good job researching this building, and I just wanted to chime in on a few things that I thought maybe could be bolstered from neighborhood familiarity. I mean, I think going back 20 years, you used to see a lot more of these stone type houses in Boulder, especially in the realm of essentially 19th to 9th on both sides of Baseline. And they were kind of a key part of Boulder that tied it to Chautauqua. When you go up there, you can see the stone structures in Chautauqua. You can see how they've preserved those. They're found throughout, but they're becoming less common. I think the closest one to this one would be 2021 Columbine, so one block over. And I think they just really do bring out an element of historic Boulder that needs to be preserved and keeps the neighborhoods tied to Chautauqua and kind of the natural elements. And I think there might be ways to do this. So I just wanted to speak in support of trying to see if there's anyone else or any other professional who can look at this and see how to do something other than demolish that beautiful stonework that's really just native to our Flatirons, and when people used to really bring the materials from locally. And that's it. I'll see the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you so much. And Brenda, did you see another hand?
I did, and I'm pretty confident about this last name, Stephen Sheffy. I will enable your microphone and you'll be sworn in.
Hello, welcome. And if you would state your full name and swear to tell the board the whole truth, and then your 3 minutes will begin.
Yes, my name is Stephen Sheffy, 2125 Mariposa, and as a traditional Quaker, I affirm that I will tell the truth, and so I hope that's what you need.
That's perfect. Thank you. You may proceed.
So in 1995, when I needed to find a place in Boulder to raise my two daughters, because sorry, I got COVID on New Year's Eve. So I'm trying to be clear voiced. Anyway, I got to find this house in Lower Chautauqua that was probably the worst in the neighborhood, and went ahead and purchased 2125 at auction in Boulder. Can you believe that? And it was a project that nobody had wanted to deal with for years. That had been on the market. Rudy Olson, who the previous owner, had died. His property went to his children. They kept the house for a couple of years, tried to sell it, could not sell it. And ultimately I said, I need to stay in Boulder and make this work. So I looked at this house and I said, this is my possibility. And I bought it for $158,000. So that was one way of going about going into a property that is problematic and has historic features and the possibility for maintaining some of the traditional look of Lower Chautauqua, which didn't have much going for it before 1950, when all the little houses went in this neighborhood. It's in the papers. You can see the picture of, to the west and to the east from the corner of 22nd, I think it's 20, no, 20. Yeah, I think it's 22nd in Mariposa. But anyway, there's no trees. You can see that there wasn't much there. From the aerial map, you can see there weren't many houses here. And so old in this neighborhood is not 1919, it's 1940s. The houses that were first built were built by craftsmen, working people, people who had businesses, and they were part of Boulder. They just weren't up the hill at Chautauqua. They were Lower Chautauqua. This is Lower Chautauqua. There's not much left of Lower Chautauqua. So I completely sympathize with Vanessa Miles in that, you know, when you take on a difficult project, you have to anticipate encountering obstacles and things that need to be done. And
Stephen, I so apologize. Your time has expired, but if you could wrap up with just a few more words.
so anyway, the house at 2119 was bought over one weekend, very fast, with an absolute firm decision. I couldn't get a word in edgewise over the weekend. So it happened. That's something to consider. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And Brenda, any additional members of the public who'd like to address this agenda item?
I am not currently seeing any additional, oh, we do have one additional hand. And so, Lynn Siegel, I will enable your microphone and you will be sworn in.
I swear to tell my truth. It's kind of a chicken or the egg type of a question. The more and more we demolish, the more and more the industry for a new build gets supported, subsidized effectively, and makes it cheaper. You know, it's $1 per square foot to demo, 1,500 minimum. Who wouldn't demo? You know, who wouldn't? That's from the Nexus study, which I followed for years, and it's set to fail. It's set up for us to be demolishing everything. You know, in Europe, places stay around 500 years. You know, here 30 to 50 years, and you can just rebuild it. It's a culture. And it's a culture that needs to change fundamentally. And if you demo these places, you're going straight into the culture of just scrape and rebuild. You know, I can tell you from my place where I tried to just add storage in the attic, and God forbid, you know, the quality of people that you get to do little jobs on your place. Yeah, it's bad. The guy had been in jail, you know, now I'm stuck with what he did. And structural 14 vertical posts. It's non-navigable storage space. And I'd gone to the structural engineer because I wanted to do the right thing with the structure, like he's got with her boards and the logs holding them, you know. But there are ways to do things, and there are people who can do it and who can be creative in doing it. And if you set up the culture so that creativity is engaged, it will happen. But it's not going to happen at $1 a square foot. Of course it's not. Everybody's going to demo, and you're going to be right there approving it, you know. And that's what Boulder is, you know. I mean, that's what I really can't understand about 770, because it should have gone through Environmental Advisory Board. It should have gone through sustainability and Jonathan Cohen and the people that are you know, preserving our carbon footprint in Boulder, because there is embedded energy in everything in this house, and there's embedded energy in getting rid of it and then dumping it. So it's
Lynn, I'm so sorry. Thank you for your comments, but your time has expired. And Brenda, any more hands raised?
I do not see any additional hands at this time.
So we will now close public participation for agenda item 5C. Vanessa, you have an additional 3 minutes to comment on anything said during public comment if you would like.
I don't have anything else to say.
Okay, thank you. We just wanted to give you that opportunity. So
Thank you.
thank you. Now we will move on to board discussion. I ask that everyone else mute your computer or phone for the duration of this discussion. We are tonight allotting approximately 30 minutes to this, but I think Marcy made a very compelling case that everybody's voice matters. And, you know, I do encourage board members to have as fulsome of discussion or comments that you wish to share this evening on this item. I don't know if someone would like to kick it off, but I might call on John to start us.
Okay, I can allow that. Based on my understanding of the criteria and based on staff's comments, I think that the first question, I guess, is that this is worthy of protection. It has uniqueness. It has, at least according to the photos shown and what it appears like from the outside, has retained most of its historic integrity. And so I think it's worthy of considering a stay.
Thank you, John. Is that it for the moment?
That's it for the moment.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah, I agree with the staff recommendation, and sorry, I'm sick, so I'm not feeling well. But I agree, and I think issuing a stay makes sense in this case based on what's been laid out in the recommendation in the memo.
Well, I'm sorry you're sick, Chelsea, but thank you for joining us despite being under the weather.
No, we're doing great on time. We're making up for last month. It's
I
great.
know, I know, but maybe going a little too fast, but we can discuss that
No,
later.
go-
Thank you, Chelsea. Bill,
I'll support a stay.
thank you, Bill and Ronnie.
I agree with my colleagues. I support a stay.
Thank you, Ronnie. I also will be supporting staff's recommendation to place a stay of demolition on this. And Marcy, have you been able, what is the date that it would expire? I'm just curious.
It would expire May 29th.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. And ML, I don't know if you would like to speak to this at all?
Thank you, Abby. Gosh, you know, I think that this project illustrates the reason for a landmarks board. Because modest vernacular houses in highly desirable neighborhoods are clearly at risk. You know, they're not the big fancy houses on Mapleton Hill, but they play a role. So I appreciate the task at hand for you all, and I'm really appreciative of the staff's findings. And I think that there's a solution to be found out there. So good for you all. And I agree that this should have a stay of demolition. But I really appreciate the hard work you guys have to do when you encounter, you know, these tough little projects. You know, these are modest people trying to do right by a historic building. And unfortunately, it's of the type that is going to have the kind of problem she encountered. It was a modest house to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I don't know if anyone would like to make a motion at this point, and if staff would be kind enough to pull up the suggested motion language.
I could make the motion.
Thank you, John.
And I could do it without condition. I move that the Landmarks Board issue a stay of demolition. Here, I'm gonna have to move my window around here. A stay of demolition for the building located at 2119 Mariposa Avenue for a period not to exceed 180 days from the day the permit application was accepted by the city manager in order to explore alternatives to demolishing the buildings and adopt the findings of the staff memorandum dated January 4th, 2023.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Yep, I'll second that.
Thank you, Ronnie. So we have a motion by John, seconded by Ronnie. Are there any additional discussion or amendments to the motion? Hearing none and not currently seeing any raised hands, we'll move on to a roll call vote. Bill?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Ronnie?
Aye.
And I vote aye, so the motion passes unanimously. And now, Marcy, would you like us to identify two Landmarks board members who will take the lead on any future meetings to discuss creative alternatives to demolition?
Yes, please.
Taking my name.
Pardon, John?
I was offering my name on that list.
That would be great, John. Anyone else would be interested to form a subcommittee during this stay? I would be willing to as well.
I will offer that if there is a site visit, probably as many board members as possible should attend.
I agree. That's always very helpful.
Yes,
So,
Abby,
go ahead.
apologies for the interruption, but John, your term is unfortunately ending before this day. I don't know if you're planning to
I am planning to reapply
Okay, then we'll cross that bridge
yet too.
if we need to. Okay.
Can I say something quick? Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to let y'all know I'll be in town on February 3rd. And I'd be happy to meet with anybody at that time too.
Okay, that's very helpful to know.
Yeah, thank you.
So I believe it's time to move on to matters.
Can I just jump in for a quick second there? Hearing the applicant, my understanding is, well, that's great that you're going to be around in February, because that timing seems appropriate for us to be able to come check it out and hopefully help in as many ways as we can. And my understanding is that staff will reach out to you and help to coordinate and, via email and possibly other ways to make sure that the timing works for you and for others. And Marcy, am I right that you guys follow up with an email to kind of summarize that and then possibly other, mechanisms? I just wanted to share that with you. I have been an applicant before, and I've walked away wondering what happens. And maybe you knew that. That's what happens. So you'll hear from somebody and we'll sort out the timing of things and explain in better detail what the process is moving forward.
Thank you, Ronnie. And before we move to matters, I'm just going to check and make sure everybody's okay, or does anyone need to take a 5-minute break? Or would you like to move on into matters?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So under matters, the first item is that there is a diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all board and commission members in 2023. And the city is providing a number of options of how to take that training. And so I am actually going to hand it over to Brenda to walk through the options, and then the board will decide how they would like to proceed.
And thank you so much for having this slide prepared for me. I should have known you would. I was just quickie putting one together because I know it's nice to put things in front of you in writing. So I'm glad to see this. It looks much nicer than the one I was throwing together. So I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of my time in 2021 working with a consultant and working with Claire and KJ and Aubrey and Lucas to work with staff on a training about increasing inclusivity and belonging, equity and diversity on our boards and commissions. So we worked with all the staff members who support our various boards and commissions across the system. You all have seen some of that come into play as we brought some of that into your retreat. You're actually one of our examples that we're pointing to of a board who has started to embrace some of these learnings and agreed to some agreements together that are helping create a more inclusive environment among you. And so we really appreciate that effort you've already gone through. And we realize that a next step after working with staff is really starting to figure out how to support you all in carrying forward the commitments that the City of Boulder has made to racial equity. And so we can't expect you to do that unless we have shared some of those concepts and language with you. And so in 2023, sorry, I said most of my time in 2021 because the years are weird since 2020. That was last year in 2022. Now we're in 2023, and we're bringing this work to you. So we have a training that staff, all of staff have started with. It is not mandatory, but it is highly encouraged for all of staff. It's called Advancing Racial Equity, the Role of Government. And it really lays out how our systems that we all live under and govern under and exist under were not built in a space of equity for all people. And so it's up to us, we who live and work in those spaces now, to try and dismantle some of those systems that are oppressing some of the members of our communities. So we want to bring those concepts to you in the way that they've been brought to all of us. So we have options in front of you for this first training, Advancing Racial Equity, the Role of Government. We can invite you to come to one of our Thursday monthly new employee orientation sessions where this work is taught. So you would sit alongside virtually, or maybe sometimes in person now, I think. You would sit alongside new employees to the city and learn this work with them as they are onboarding into our organization. And you'll see that takes place the third Thursday of every month. It's during the day, during working hours. I think they are in the mornings, but could not be confidently quoted on that. And it looks like they alternate between virtual and in person. The second option is we can come here to you. My colleague Ana Silvia and I anticipate visiting boards and commissions throughout the year with a 3.5-hour training, but the first hour of that you would do on your own time. So we would be asking for a 2.5-hour chunk of one of your monthly agendas or a special meeting that you all convened together. And we would give you links to videos to watch ahead of time that last about an hour all total. So that's one way that it can sort of fit into your regular meeting cadence if there is the agenda space for that. We would endeavor to bring another board to this meeting if possible, or maybe there are other boards that are already meeting at this moment and we could bring you all together into one room so that there was a maximum of 18 participants. And then we can also stand up trainings that we invite you to. This is actually the first approach we tried to use a couple of years ago for this training. We tried to create times outside of everyone's meeting times that you could then sign up for and come to and sit alongside other board and commission members from other boards and commissions. And we're thinking those would probably look like a Tuesday or a Wednesday evening or a Saturday morning. Again, the hour assignment at home, and then the 2.5 hours spent with us in conversation. So we want you to have autonomy over how you do this. It's probably best to decide as a full board so that we're not trying to bring a training to a board where half of you have already attended that training elsewhere. And so it's great for you all to decide together what option you like best, and then we can slot you in and build what you need. And then I love, once we figure out the what, I would love to hear about the when and think about what quarter might work best for your board. But I can also work more closely with staff on that one. So I open it up for questions and discussion. Or however Abby would do that, since that part is her job. Sorry, Abby.
Well, no, I'd like to hear the thoughts and what works best for each of my colleagues. I could actually do any of these suggested times or dates and ways to achieve it.
The only thing I would suggest we not do is have it on one of our meetings, our regular meetings, just because it's already
Pretty
quite
packed.
long. So yeah, I would no more 1 a.m. meetings. That's our new goal for 2023.
Yeah, that is not a good learning environment, Chelsea. So
yeah, yeah. So that would be my only suggestion, is to not do it then. But I think other than that, I don't have strong preferences.
I mean, we did, just to address that, Chelsea, we did have one instance last year in 2022 when we had a meeting where we had no public hearings, and we kind of didn't really have anything going on, that would be the only option for something like that. But 3.5 hours is kind of long, even if there was nothing else.
Well, and if we brought the training to you all here in this space, it would be 2.5 hours here with an hour of homework before that. So you
Right.
that hour on your own, and then we'd spend 2.5 hours. So it really would require some agenda balancing for sure, because we don't want to attach an additional 2.5 hours onto your regular workload.
I mean, just personally speaking, I think option C looks like it could work the best for me. So there's an option for everybody there, it looks like.
Ronnie or Bill?
Probably B for me.
I mean, I think like you're saying, Brenna, there's a agenda balance piece that could make it possible to meet during a landmarks board meeting. I would prefer that because that time's carved out, but I am not in the position to say that that's possible. So, I kind of feel like for me, that would be ideal. We're already meeting. And so I guess it would be good to hear from staff if they can forecast that or carve it out. And if not, then I'd be up for trying to find some other time.
Right, it's unpredictable. And I would say, I can tell you that we have 3 cases already for February and are talking to folks about March. So while there is usually a meeting with no agenda throughout the year, it's unpredictable. But we could have a special meeting, but what I'm hearing is plug into the time commitment you all have already made rather than an additional time outside of that.
I think I would prefer that. I mean, I guess I'll also just offer, I don't know if it's on this list here, but during one of our DRC sessions, if we actually have the time during one of those, I could see myself being able to carve that out too. But again,
that's a very good idea, Ronnie.
My schedule is mine, and we could find something else. Like I'm sure that there's an evening or a Saturday that would work, and I'm just proposing another option there.
Yeah, that could definitely work. But Brenda, how much advance notice do you and your colleagues need to schedule this?
We can put it together pretty quickly. I mean, I think the biggest concern for advance notice is to give you all time to do the hour homework. If you're doing B or C, right? I would also ask sort of what, to me, I feel like there's value both in sitting alongside each other so that you're having a consistent experience together. There can also be value in going and sitting with other folks and getting different types of perspectives. B could ideally hold both, because if we could find another board to match make with your board at the time that you're meeting, you could get both of those things. But I would put that in the mix as a consideration as well.
It is interesting, Brenda, just a comment. I attended one of these in the conference in Cincinnati this summer. I don't know if it was the same type of program, except it was a session on inclusivity, and it was interactive with the audience. And it was interesting because none of these people that were in the room I knew before, and they were from all over the country. And it was really interesting to get that kind of almost some of the different regional perspectives on all these issues. And I found it to be a very interesting session. So that being said.
Yeah, I do like the idea of perhaps doing it with other board members and commissions. But what's the best way to kind of move forward or next steps or nail this down?
We could take a preference straw poll. I'm not going to call it a vote. But I heard, so I did not hear anyone very attracted to option A, right? Where you would join new employees at their orientation on the third Thursday of every month, virtual or in person, right? So I'm hearing more interest in B, which could be LRDC time, could be Landmarks Board time, or in C, where we would pick a time and invite you and other board members to come. And that would probably be multiple times. That would be the opportunity where you'd most likely be sitting alongside other board members while doing it. B, you would definitely be sitting alongside each other and potentially other board members as well. So I'm going to straw poll for option B. And Ronnie's not here to straw poll, but I heard him very strongly say B, so I'm going to count him in that one.
I'm here. And I'm flexible. So I think B is something I will raise my hand for.
All right. Others for B?
Yeah, I'll raise my hand for that, but I'm gonna throw in that LDRC is a Landmarks Board meeting also, and so that should be an option considered as part of option B.
Absolutely.
I also would go for B.
Okay. Chelsea, I'm not sure if that's a.
Oh yeah, sorry. B with not full agenda. Sounds great.
All right. And Bill, how do you feel about that?
I already said B.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Just circling back. All right. Awesome. So we will work toward that for you. I'll work with staff and Marcy will help us figure out how to make that work for you all. And in what quarter to, some folks are preferring sooner than later. Some folks are preferring, if they're anticipating a change of the members of the board, waiting until after that happens. But we know that that is not necessarily guaranteed in this case. So, yeah.
Just clarification, because we're going to go and start working calendars and applications. Does anyone oppose using an LDRC time if we can't use Landmarks Board time?
I don't oppose that.
Great. Thank you. We will get to work on finding a time where we're balancing agendas, and we will let you all know. Thank you.
Can I throw one more out there? If we can't find either of our regular meeting times to work, does anybody oppose option C?
No.
And I just offer that, Marcy, because I can imagine what it's like on the other end of this, where you're like, have a list of things that you got to do. So there could be an option C as well if we're confronted with some scheduling nightmares.
I'm gonna caveat that I would like option C, but I would prefer the Saturday time, I believe.
Maybe if we end up going that route, we do a doodle poll thing or something and sort it out.
Well, and we haven't built those yet, but I imagine there'll be a variety of different times, including Saturday mornings, because those have been successful for us in the past with other types of orientations and trainings for boards and commissions to put a Saturday morning option. So thank you for voicing it. And that reaffirms the direction we were heading with that option, John. Thanks.
All right. Another decision. Okay, there is a historic preservation, nope, a historic places plan, HIP, public open house. That's the plan that Parks and Rec is completing about each of the city-owned landmarks that Parks and Rec manages. And so it's a public open house. You all are invited. It is January 25th from 4 to 6 p.m. and it is in person at the Muni building. So we will send additional information about that to you all, but mark your calendars. If you're interested in going, also know that the project manager from Parks and Rec will be attending a future Landmarks Board meeting to present the plan to you all. So you will have a chance for board specific input, but if you're interested in the open house, it's on January 25th.
Okay.
Great. Ronnie?
Hey, Marcy, quick question. This is just a favor. Can we have, someone on our team put that on our calendars? Like, as one of the invites that we normally do, those are always so helpful.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. And then the last thing we have under matters is that the 2023 Saving Places conference is coming up. It's just around the corner, February 8th, 9th, and 10th. And for the very first time, it is in Boulder. And so it's very convenient. I know Historic Boulder is planning some tours of the little rectangle, the civic area, and the downtown Pearl Street Mall. And some of the other sessions, especially the keynote speakers, look really great. And then Abby and I will be on a panel discussion for Boulder's first 50 years of historic preservation. Historic Boulder's leading that one, and then I'm representing the city. And then Claire will be part of the civic area tour. So let Audrey know if you're planning to attend. I would say even if you can attend just a few sessions, go ahead and register. It's so convenient being local this year, and the sessions are always high quality. There's my plug for the CPI conference. Okay. That's all I have for matters.
So Marcy, would you be kind enough to introduce Olivia?
Oh, absolutely. Olivia Simard is our new historic preservation intern. She replaces Faith, who is now back in Virginia, starting her first professional job. Olivia was in the same program as Faith at CU Denver. She is getting a dual degree of historic preservation and urban planning. We've really appreciated all of her work in just her first 2 weeks. She's getting up to speed very quickly and is going to be really helpful for our program. So welcome, Olivia.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. And do any board members have anything they'd like to bring up?
I will be traveling, I think over the next board meeting, which is February 1st. So I won't be here, but I saw that all of our 2023 LDRC meetings were put on our calendar recently, and I believe is there an LDRC meeting the day of the February 1st meeting?
We usually try and cancel those.
Okay, well, I was wondering if it's not canceled, I need to switch with somebody for the LDRC meeting of the 25th and the 1st, if there is one. So if somebody is willing to switch with me, I'm happy to take your LDRC meetings. But I need someone to switch because I will be out of the country.
I'm happy to do it if I'm not already scheduled.
Yeah, I'm scheduled already.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you and Chelsea are scheduled, I'm probably not. So I'd be happy to do that, Chelsea. And then you're talking about January 25th or February?
January. So I'll be gone January 25th and February 1st. So if if you have one of the upcoming ones, just let me know which ones you want to switch me for.
I don't think I'm assigned the 25th, so I'll do that. And it may be sometime in the summer, sometime down the road, Chelsea, but I'll let you know.
Just let me know. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Anything else? Then in kind of a world record setting pace, the meeting is adjourned at 8:26 p.m.
Abby, so sorry. I thought you were
Oh.
going to go to a debrief afterwards.
My
so-
apologies. You're right. So Marcy, I have the wrong cheat sheet in front of me all night.
Well, you're
So
doing great
So I've been
considering.
trying to do it from my tiny cell phone that I can barely read. So Marcy, I do see that. Sorry.
Okay, I just want to say, it's 8:27. We had 3 cases and, I really appreciate the board, being open to these adjustments. I will also say it went way faster than I anticipated, because just as an observation, we had an hour scheduled for each one and the board deliberation was 30 minutes of that. But the first 2 cases, you all made motions in record setting time within 10 minutes of board deliberation, and the last one was within 5 minutes. So I just want to say that I do think that it's beneficial for the board to hear each other's perspectives and for the applicant to understand the decision-making process, and to do it in a timely manner. So I think there's maybe a balance between last meeting and this meeting, and we can figure it out together. But please reach out to me if you have any feedback on these adjustments, or if you have new ideas. I'm very open to hearing your feedback.
Thank you, Marcy. And it's funny because the last one, I felt like it took me 2 weeks to kind of recover from that. And I don't have a newborn baby, but I think that it's funny because I do think the last meeting was a little bit more unique than this one, because I think the cases were more complicated and there were more nuances in each of those issues. So I think it's a little difficult to compare last month's meeting to this one just based on the agenda items. I also think staff's presentations and memorandums really buttressed some of the speed with which decisions could be made tonight. But I also know how much it means to me to hear from my colleagues. There was one of the hearings last month, it was the last one, there were some things John said that were so compelling, it actually impacted the way I ended up voting. And so I think it's important to have fulsome conversations and everyone feel comfortable saying what they want, because not only have I appreciated that, not only has it maybe swayed me or given me a new perspective to look at something, but I just value everybody's remarks at every meeting. Even if we go on longer than we really probably needed to last month, I just, I don't want to see anything stifled, because I also will say I just learned things during some of the other board's members' remarks and comments during deliberation. So I think it's important to keep that up.
Yeah, I feel like it's very similar to what you're saying. I think these are examples of 2 kind of extremes. I want to hear from Bill in future meetings. I think that the third applicant case represented something unique that I have a feeling was a missed opportunity to talk a little bit about the benefits of the stay and the resource that provides, which we sometimes explain a little bit to folks that don't have professional representation or aren't experienced veteran developers that have gone through a process like this. And that crossed my mind, but I was going to keep it short. anyway, I think we did a pretty good job, and I agree with you guys. It's like there's probably a little bit of a balance there. I feel like that was maybe a missed opportunity that I felt like I should have jumped in and said something and didn't. But will next time.
Yeah, but having said that, Ronnie, hopefully staff will explain to the applicant what this means and what they could possibly gain from it. And as a participant in the process, I'll take pains to explain things to the applicant too as we go through that.
Yeah, and maybe staff already did, so I don't want to like make something out of nothing. But I do know what it means to leave a meeting with questions, as opposed to like, maybe tomorrow there's going to be something circulated, and somebody will sleep a little bit better with that little bit of effort. And
yeah,
I feel like we could do that when we know that that person might not be aware. I'm just making this up, so maybe this person is totally aware. But I do feel like in principle, if one of our goals here is to be collaborative with people, that is something that I think it would go a long way. So.
Any other remarks or comments specifically to debriefing this particular meeting? Hearing or seeing none? And Marcy, nothing else from staff?
Nothing else.
So the January 2023 meeting is adjourned at 8:32 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Good
And
night.
welcome
Good
again,
year,
Olivia.
everybody.
Here, here.
Thank you. Happy 2023.
Yeah, it's here.